Welcome to Spreadsheet Geek. This video was made using Microsoft Excel 2019. What we're going to talk about today is the Sumif function and the SUMIFS function. These are very similar. What they both do is sum up a group of cells that you designate within their arguments, and you sum them up if they meet a certain criteria, or in the case of the SUMIFS function, you can enter multiple criteria, up to 127 criteria if you desire. Let's start out with a simple example. This is about as simple as it gets. So we have sales here of sodas, beers, wines, and waters. And this is our sales for the day. Maybe we're operating a drink stand at a fair. And you can see that sodas are $2, beer and wine are $4, and waters are $1. So what I'd like to do in this example is all I care about is the price point. And I want to know how many sales we generated at that price point. This is an opportunity to use SUMIF because we only have one criteria, and that is the price point. So we type in our function, get that started, and it asks for the range. So my range is going to be over here. And I'll separate these with a comma. And what is my criteria? Well, I'm looking in this row for the $4 drinks. And after that, it's got some range. So this, and you'll notice it's in square brackets, and that means it doesn't always need to be specified. And in this case, it doesn't, because our sum range is the same as our criteria range. So if you don't enter a sum range, Excel will assume that you're using your criteria range. So I'm just going to close that off. And before I hit the enter key, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to fix my range by making these absolute and hitting the F4 key. So there you can see it. We have $40 worth of $4 drinks. Now let's just double check that and make sure that that's right. And there's your sum of $40. So that looks good. We can go ahead and autofill that down and see that we had $8 worth of $2 drinks and $7 worth of $1 drinks sold that day. That is the SUMIF function, one criteria, about as simple as it gets because the criteria range is also the sum range. Now we're going to go on to probably a more typical example. We're still going to use the SUMIF function, but this time our criteria range is going to be separate from our sum range, so we will enter the second argument. This is salesperson data. We have 4 salespeople, but as in all my examples, you should assume that this might be thousands of rows long with hundreds sales of people or rows of data. Each salesperson has a region that they can have sales in. You see some of Bob's sales are in the West region and others are in the East region. These are sales all in the first half of 2020. There's an invoice number and a commission that Bob or the other people were paid during each of those sales. So what we want to find in this first one is pretty simple. We just want their total commissions. So we're going to use the SUMIF function here. The first thing it asks for is the range, and that's the criteria range. So I'm going to want to look in these cells for that range. And it's now asking for the criteria. And for this row, that's going to be Bob Smith. And now it wants to know the sum range. And this time we do have that. So we're going to enter over here, this column. We want Bob's total commissions under his name during this period, or all the data on the table. I'm going to go ahead and fix my ranges so that I can paste this formula down. And we're going to see that Bob had $17,772.10, and that's correct. Let's go ahead and paste that down. And the total of this, $47,977, should match that. So that looks good. That's a good example of how to use the SUMIF function. Let's look at another example now using the SUMIFS function. And we're going to have two criteria on this one. Not only do we want a name match, we want a region match as well. We're only interested in the East region sales, not West. So how is this going to work? It's very similar, but the mechanization of the arguments is, and the order of the arguments is slightly different. So let's get the SUMIFS function started. It's asking for the sum range first. So that's over here. We're interested in commissions. Now it's asking for the criteria range 1. So the first thing, this is criteria range 1, this is criteria range 2. So the first criterion range is over here, comma, and the criteria we're looking for in that criteria range 1 is here, comma, and then you go on to criteria range 2 and criteria 2. So very similar. Region, criteria range 2, and criteria 2, East. That's it. We're done. We could go on entering a third and fourth if we needed to. I'm going to go ahead and make these all absolute references. Not all of them, but the ranges. And we'll hit the enter key. 13,497 East sales for Bob. So all of Bob's East sales are right here. That looks like it's right. And we can go ahead and paste this down. And we've got 31,078 total East sales. I'm not going to go through there and check that, but that's a good example of how to use SUMIFS when you have two criteria. Let's move on to a final example with 3 criteria. Again, we're going to use the SUMIFS function. Now this time I'm going to throw in something a little bit more intricate, and we want to know the salesperson, the region, and the Q1 or first quarter sales between January and March. Now you'll notice over here these dates fall anywhere from January to June. So we're going to screen out the ones that fall into the second quarter. So how are we going to do that? Well, I'm going to enter a formula here. The first day of Q2 is April 1st, 2020. So expressed as a number, I'll just take out the decimals, that's 43922. So I'm going to put in here a little less than 43922. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that down for everybody. And I'll clear that away. So that's our time frame. We want dates prior to this date, and dates are numbers in Excel. So let's go ahead with our SUMIFS. Okay, the first thing it's asking for is the sum range. So again, we're interested in commissions, so here's the sum range. Criteria range 1. Well, that's the name. Here's my criteria range, comma. Criteria 1 is right here, comma. Criteria range 2, that's region, comma. Here's criteria 2, comma. And criteria range 3, that is the date. And for criteria 3, we're actually going to enter this. I'm going to close my parentheses. I'm going to turn all of these references in ranges into absolutes so that I can paste the formula down. And according to this, Bob Smith in the East region Q1 has 3702. So here's Bob's East region, and those are, 2 of them are falling in the first quarter. The third one is not. So these should add to 3702.54. So that looks good. And there's your answer. Amelia down here had no sales that fit all 3 of these conditions. That's an example of how to use the SUMIFS function with 3 criteria. And if you had more, you can enter additional criteria up to 127. In this lesson, we talked about the SUMIF and the SUMIFS function. There's 2 other pairs of functions that operate in a very similar way. The COUNTIF and COUNTIFS and AVERAGEIF and AVERAGEIFS functions are very similar, but instead of summing, they're either counting or averaging. So if you can master SUMIF and SUMIFS, you've really mastered the other ones as well. If you've enjoyed the content of this video and found it useful, please consider hitting my subscribe button.